Welcome back to the eighth episode of our TV podcast, where we are talking about The Last of Us Season 2, Episode 5, titled Feel Her Love, as well as The Studio Season 1, Episode 9,
The
titled
penultimate.
CinemaCon. Yes, the penultimate episode of The Studio, um, which inspired the start of this TV pod. But first, we can talk about The Last of Us because that's the bigger deal, I guess. I was just looking. I know we've kind of talked about this on previous episodes, but I was just taking a peek, right? You're gonna play a guessing game, okay? This is for context. I'm gonna read you down the line the IMDb ratings of all of the episodes in the first season, and then I want you to guess what they are for the episodes in the second season. So, first season, you ready? This is your context. First season of The Last of Us in order: 9.1 out of 10, 9 out of 10, 8.1 out of 10, 8.3 out of 10, 9.4, 8.8, 7.3. That one dipped a little. And then the season ended with a 9.3 and a 9.0. Now,
Okay.
season 2. What do you think the first episode was rated?
Oh, like, you want to say the number of the rating?
Yeah.
Season 2 was, on IMDb, season 2 was rated okay, so this is interesting because, I've seen a little bit of chatter about IMDb because I don't know if you heard this, but, the Andor finale, the last 5 episodes of Andor is the only TV show on the history of IMDb to have a 5-episode stretch of where every episode's rated over a 9.6 or something.
Yeah, that's
Um,
crazy.
uh, but so the first episode of The Last of Us season 2, I'm gonna guess, was an 8.0.
7.4.
7.4, okay, wow.
Episode 2, this is the episode where Joel dies, the big one.
Yeah, that's gonna be like a 9.1.
9.3.
9 Jesus Christ,
Okay,
okay.
but now, and this is the important part. Guess the ratings of the post Joel episode. So episode 3 is the first post Joel episode. What do you think?
So, that's I'm gonna guess 7.8.
7 flat.
So 7 flat?
Now the episode following that, the episode that we did last week titled Day 1, which I said was maybe my favorite episode of the season, excluding
Right.
the Joel episode. What do you think that one's rated?
7.6, 7.7.
6.4.
Okay,
And
okay.
now we get to the episode that we're talking about today,
This
Feel Her
one
Love,
this
which
one
which Doug called the if I and you could tell me if I'm saying this wrong, but I believe you texted and said this is the best episode of not the season, but the series.
in
Keep in
some
mind those
ways
ratings that I read to you before.
it is the best episode of the series.
Right. What do you think it's rated though?
Like an 8.1.
7.6.
Oh, why? What the fuck?
This is why I wanted to play the guessing game, specifically because of that text you sent saying that it was the best episode of the series. These
Yeah,
last 3 episodes, it looks like the average rating for them is actually the average rating for the last 3 episodes is exactly a 7.0 after a first season that averaged about a 9 on IMDb.
yeah.
The
IMDb. I'm
average rating
yawning.
is a
Very rude.
7.0, and you loved this episode. So that's why I
Yeah,
wanted to put it into context what your experience
IMDb
is
ratings
against
are
the
dumb.
average. Sure, but this is, these
No,
are
yeah, no, no, no. Yeah,
this is
you're
a
right.
lot of ratings, about
Yeah.
20,000 ratings an episode,
Do you
30,000 if you go back to the earlier ones.
do you know that the season finale of Mandalorian season 2 has a 9.8 rating?
Yeah, that makes sense though. That's like an
Oh,
IMDb rating. Like,
and that's like a piece of shit, like
yeah.
bad
I
episode
mean,
of TV.
TV episodes are interesting, and sometimes they get it right, but I don't know, but it's almost like they're getting it right because you can't get it wrong, you know what I mean? Where it's I'm sure there's, like, a stretch of episodes of The Sopranos that have, like, a 9.9 on IMDb, but also it's like, you'd have to be an idiot to not see that, you know?
Sure.
Um, so with like the Mandalorian, like you said, I think it's like a little bit more just the fan base, and that's also the problem is that people are really only rating these episodes if they have such strong opinions about them. I've never rated an episode of TV on IMDb, but I guess the average person might have some interest.
I
Um,
would like to start this conversation off about this Last of Us episode by addressing a criticism I was kind of giving about the previous episode
oh, okay.
regarding the
Because
characterization
I
of
once again
Ellie.
have a solid like plot by plot point kind of breakdown here. Not like super
Okay.
specific, but we can start with the general. So what is this criticism that you had?
Well, I said in the last episode, I was annoyed with how Ellie has been characterized. I was saying that really, if I remember correctly, I was talking about how I think Ellie should be more angry. How Ellie is very, like too chill, not stressed out enough.
Sure.
Um, and this
Pretty
episode,
angry episode.
well, yes, well, this episode brings that into the text of this show, and it becomes a little bit more like, oh yes, Ellie is mask off. Like Ellie is doing a very good job at being chill,
Yeah.
and it is a mask, and the mask comes off in this episode, which
Yeah.
goes
I think
directly into criticisms, or comparing it to the video game where
right.
the I forgot the actor. It's Ashley something. I forget the actress that voices Ellie in the video game,
Yeah, I
but it's
don't
like
know off the top of my head any of the actors' names, but
Ellie in the video game is more angry all the time, more upset all of the time,
yeah,
as like the base level.
sure.
Um, but
Yeah. There's yeah. I was listening to the Last of Us podcast talk about some of the differences between the game and this episode, and there are some pretty significant ones. And some of the directions that they go in, I think, are really interesting. If we're gonna go point by point, the episode opens, and we see a conversation between workers at or like wolves at the hospital talking about how the bottom two floors of the hospital were closed off because of these. I believe they're called spores.
yeah,
That where people can get infected through the air that they breathe rather than an actual uh, zombie or infected. Um, and so that's how the episode opens is that we get this like even though we don't know the character very well, pretty like emotional setup. The idea that her son was left behind in those the floors that are contaminated, um especially because of what we learn later in the episode, which is that I think on the podcast they described it as a fate worse than death, which is pretty apt way to put what happens to these people. Obviously the character in the opening who's talking about her son doesn't I guess know that that's the fate that her son is suffering down there, but it gets pretty gnarly when we find out what it looks like down in those first two floors. That's later in the episode. What do you think about the opening?
I thought it was pretty good. We're talking about before we see Ellie and Dina.
Yeah,
It's
this is
the
just like that
our,
scene with the two of them before
yeah. There's this
the opening
returning
credits.
character from the episode previously. It's the same woman that Jeffrey Wright kind of speaks to before he kills Josh Peck,
Sure.
right?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think so.
Um. And yeah, I thought that was interesting. It felt very TV drama. Like,
Yeah,
I've been watching a lot of House MD. Well, I just finished House MD actually,
sure.
and it
For the
reminded
first
me
time?
all the whole thing. Yeah,
Okay, but you had like watched episodes previously when you were younger.
yeah. It was
Okay.
like one of the three biggest shows in the world in like
Yeah.
2007, or
Well,
yeah,
when you were like 2 years old.
yeah. Well, when you would have been 24 in 2007.
Sure. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. No, it was a big show. I only ever watched like like an episode here or there when it was on TV and I was in the mood. I don't really know like the overarching. Anyway, that's not important.
yeah, I was like,
How does House relate to what
well,
you
no,
were
it
about to
just
say?
like the beginning of this Last of Us episode reminded me of like a serious moment in like an episode of Law and Order, like some daytime
Sure.
TV drama. You
Sure.
know?
I do like the concept of like something serious going on. Like I like the idea of like them having the serious conversation, and then just like a couple floors below them is like where the really bad thing is happening.
Yeah.
I think that's fun. That is very like dramatic television. Yeah, I liked that. And then we cut to Ellie and Dina, like you said. And the beginning of this episode for them is them kind of devising a plan, a route, because there is only two of them. And so they've got a tough road ahead. There's some triangulating happens, which Ellie learns about from Dina. And then they kind of uh, find their way, and the path that they're going to go on. I don't know if you had anything to add about that part. It's mostly just a lot of setup, but if you
Yeah,
there's a
no, I mean,
detail in there that you want to mention.
during during kind of this part of the episode, I was thinking, man, this show could really use like a Pedro Pascal kind of presence. Um, or like even like, can we get Jeffrey Wright back in here? And I was like, am I an
Sure.
asshole? Um,
Yeah. I I d- I didn't think it was the most compelling TV, but I do think the idea of like I don't know, it's weird because in the writing, I don't know that I care much for it, but as a concept, I think I like the idea of them planning out like missions. Like I think that's fun for TV is like here's how we're going to do it as like a setup device. I think that's cool. I don't know that the way that it was like executed is the most compelling, but I think watching Ellie and Dina like conceive plans more would be fun if it I think it's funny that it's like
yeah,
this is how we triangulate locations. I'm like that's kind of stupid, but like it's one of those things where it's like I want to see it, and this it just doesn't work this way because of the nature of the show that we're watching, which is like these are two teenagers. But like when it's like people who are really smart doing things that they really know about and explaining stuff that I don't understand to me, that is like awesome TV, like it's like to call back to my favorite show that I've mentioned on here multiple times, The Pit. It's like when you're watching the doctors in The Pit explain like the surgery that they're about to do. They're like, "Oh yeah, we're gonna intubate him and then like do this, this, and that." And I'm like, I don't know what any of that means, but it sounds fucking cool. If they were like describing their route and they were like, really like trained like military experts being like, "We're gonna do this, this, and this," I'd be like, "That sounds fucking cool." But them like explaining like algebra to each other or whatever. I'm like, I don't know that this is um the most fun for me to watch. But it's funny. It's funny in the same way that like, when the pride thing happened the previous episode and Ellie didn't like they didn't know what it was. I'm like, yeah, it's funny that this is like stuff that they're learning. Uh
yeah.
anyway,
No, I don't know if Craig Mazin is the most talented writer in the world. Um,
sure. This is an
yeah,
opinion that you and I guess I have also held for the entire time that we've been talking about this show,
yeah,
but but it hasn't stopped us from watching it, so that's worth noting.
oh, that is
Uh,
true.
I guess nothing could really stop me from watching the show, even if it's not like it's not my favorite show, and I think we've said that before. But it's just like
It is, it is.
I'm in.
There's, I mean, how many shows airing at the same time right now are better than it? Like at least three, right?
Well, do you mean like the episodes are currently coming out week by week, or just like they're in the middle of their existence?
Oh, I guess those are totally different questions.
Yeah.
Oh,
Because, like, like, The Pit, we're just waiting for season 2, but The Pit is
right.
I like more than The
Well,
Last of
I
Us.
was thinking
Or are you
like,
talking about, like, shows that are coming out right now?
well, I was thinking like Andor, which actually just
Sure.
ended, like
And
literally
then The
just ended this week.
Rehearsal.
But, like, and the rehearsal, and like maybe the studio. You want to throw in the studio, right?
Oh, okay.
Um,
Okay.
you know,
That's a that's
uh,
a that's a debate that we could have. I mean, those are the 2 shows we talk
you know,
about
I
every
mean, we
week.
talk about them every week.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess that's a fair point. Then when they leave after they've devised their plan, the big detail here before we get to the fun, exciting stuff is that Dina tells this backstory about her family being murdered, and it's an important detail because uh, the setup before it while they're planning is like why is Dina still doing this? Because she's pregnant, and so you need some sort of reason to justify her wanting to stay on this journey and risk her life and now the life of her baby. Uh, and so that's the reason is that she kind of explains why she would do that for Joel. And also there's like some details in there where I was like, oh, that's interesting phrasing. I was like, oh, I was like, I don't know. I mean, obviously they're characters in a TV show, and so their opinions don't have to be the same opinions as mine. Um, but there's, like, some interesting phrasing in there where she says something along the lines of, like, if someone, like, does the violence first, does it matter or something? And I was like,
Oh,
"It does matter." I was like, "It's a
yeah.
that does matter." It's like, if you're an innocent person who has violence done to you, then, yeah, I do think that does matter in terms of retaliation.
No,
Uh,
yeah, I don't
but
know. I don't her, it is interesting because it's like her logic that Dina is presenting where it's like they shouldn't have done this to Joel, right?
yeah, no matter what
Could
he did.
could be applied to them hunting them down.
Yes.
That's why it's like, "Oh, that's
Especially
interesting."
since we
Like,
know that what they were going to do to Abby is going to be as brutal as what happened to Joel. And
well,
so well, sure. Well, I'm not saying what happens in the show. I'm
yeah, yeah.
saying like our perspective as viewers in this exact moment. If we knew no other like if we haven't played the video game and we're just watching this as a TV show, then our assumption can be that they are going to torture Abby in the same way that Abby tortured Joel. I think that's fair to assume,
Right.
just like using the context that we know about the characters. And so if that's the case, then yeah, correct. It is a little bit hypocritical, though I think that's probably the point. Um, but yeah, I
No, yeah,
it's
yeah,
interesting because some of like the moral arguments in the show are like and I think this is one of the things that I kind of like about the show, if we were gonna get into it, is that, like, some of the moral arguments that the show poses, I'm just like, everybody kind of goes against these. Like, it's like it it
yeah,
it, like, rate like, there's like a principle that a character has, and then that character is kind of violating that principle, whether they're conscious of it or not, and I think that's really human as well, so I'm like, that's a cool detail to have in the show, and so that's why I'm not too worried about what she said. I'm just like in my head when I was watching it, I was like, I don't really agree with that, but that's fine. Anyway, anything else you want to add there about the backstory part of it all?
no, 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 no. I do think that is good characterization. I think that Ellie was not equipped to hear any of that. I
Yeah,
don't think that
sure.
she really engaged with her in a way that
Yeah.
was normal.
No, that's true. And then we get to this part where the action in the episode starts to rise. And what happens is Ellie and Dina uh, are in this building that they plan to walk through, and they find out that they're sort of trapped because the infected that are in the building with them are not just normal infected, but in fact the kind of smarter thinking infected that Ellie ran into in a previous episode. And so that was a pretty tough battle for Ellie when it was just one of them. Now there are a lot of them, a
Yeah, a
number of
lot of them. This was
them.
scary. This was
No, it was
scary.
actually scary. And that's
Yeah,
one thing I want to touch on because there's a moment later in the episode that I want to talk about, but it's like I do kinda wish we were leaning a little bit more into the horror because that is like a thing that I mean, at least all season for me that that's mostly not been a thing. And I guess it really wasn't like a huge thing in the first season. There were moments, but I'm like, I want this to be like actually scary. Like I know that
yeah.
it's one of my and again, I'll get to this when we talk about the other thing I want to mention, but that it's like a small criticism I have. But in this moment, I was like it's pretty scary, especially when they like shine the flashlight in the direction where they realize that there are like a lot more of them. When it's like,
Yeah.
oh, you're like fucked now. Like it's not just like
Well, yeah.
you thought you were already fucked, and then you turn and you're like, oh, we're like super fucked. Like
And
there's
Ellie
no
kinda
escaping.
cooks up a plan, and it
Yeah.
goes horribly wrong, and they both almost die.
Yes.
Um,
However, I think this is also like super great character detail because essentially what Ellie's plan is like I'm gonna die because
yeah,
What Ellie says is like yeah, she has some line where she's like, "I could get bit a lot," you know?
yeah,
And so, what she's suggesting to Dina is for Dina to like have faith in the idea that they're both going to escape this situation. But I
Yeah.
imagine what Ellie is doing is really just sacrificing herself for Dina, because if she knows that she struggled as much as she did against the one smart infected, there's no like there's no getting out of this situation. It's not just about being bitten. Like if there's that many of them, they're gonna do more than bite you. Like they're gonna kill you. And so I think she is kind of in that moment making a sacrifice and thinking that she's probably just not going to escape this situation. Like she just wants Dina to get to safety and be the one to escape. But then they are saved by Jesse. Uh,
Yeah, Jesse comes out of fucking nowhere.
yeah,
Um,
and then the triangulating comes back. They're like, "How did you know where we were?" And he's like, "I saw your map," which is that's also weird because then that suggests that they just like left the map behind, which I'm like,
yeah.
wouldn't you bring that with you? Not even just for like, not even
Well,
just to use it on your way, but also just to not have it left behind for somebody else to find.
but also to use it on your way though. That's why you
Yeah,
have a
no.
map, right?
Yeah, exactly. But I'm just saying,
Yeah.
like, there's multiple reasons to like, no matter what, there's no excuse to just leave it behind. Like, it's like the some thought must, especially because Dina is kind of the logical one, where it's like Ellie does a lot of things, and then Dina is like, no, we have to do it like this, and so it's like, did Dina not think of at least one of these like reasons to bring the map with you? But whatever. And for the sake of getting Jesse to the place that he needs to be at, it makes sense. This is another one of those like weird writing things though, where it's like you just kind of like that was just like convenient writing, where it's like I don't think that they would have done that.
How
I
did you
don't.
find us here? Well, I
Yeah,
found your map at the library.
yeah, it's like
Um,
I just don't think that would have happened, and I don't know, whatever, it's fine, but it happens, and then Jesse is there. But no, I really like that scene specifically because Ellie is like essentially sacrificing herself, and I'm like, that's um, that's really powerful.
yeah,
Uh,
Ellie is such a silly character because she's like, "What? Why did you even come? Like, we were doing fine." And he's like, "Yeah, you were. I
yeah.
mean, maybe until you just weren't right now."
Yeah, but then
Like,
she owns it, which I think is
yeah,
interesting because that's also a really good scene for that reason. It's like not only is she sacrificing herself for Dina, which I think is powerful on its own, but then the other detail we learn when Jesse saves them is that Tommy is elsewhere in Seattle looking for them. They split up. And so now she has to like that's the first moment where when like she's confronted with it, where it's like when it was her and Dina being sacrificed, Dina was in it with her. Like Dina wants to do this with her. But now Ellie is like, because of what she did, directly responsible for something happening to Jesse and Tommy. Like if something happens to either of them, she just has to own that. And so like this is like the first moment I think where like really first moment where like she has to feel super bad because especially because she's seen what happened to Joel and, like, how that ended, like, how their relationship ended in the worst way possible, so now it's like, if you're gonna fuck over Tommy and Jesse in the process, like, you have to start feeling bad about it, like, the one thing that you're gonna learn from Joel's death is, like, how you value these personal relationships and that, like, other people are involved and that, like, you're risking other people's lives and stuff, and so I think this is, like, a really good scene for that reason, even if we put aside the fact that Jesse just should not have saved them, like, it's just there's no logic for Jesse to have been there,
yeah,
but it's still mostly a really good scene, uh, and then when they escape they end up in the woods, and this is the part I want to get to. In the woods, they see the Seraphites, the scars as the wolves call them, and they have captured one of these wolves and are hanging him from a tree before cutting open his body, as we've seen them do in last week's episode. Uh, and he's kind of like begging them. He's trying to give them information, and I think this is cool. Is like what we learn about them is that there's no, like, talking your way out of it, where it's like I mean, obviously, in the case with Jeffrey Wright's character, he would've killed that guy anyway, even if he gave him information, but Jeffrey Wright is gonna torture you for the information. They're just like they have, like, this holy calling where it's like, no matter what you try to do to get out of this situation, like, your fate is sealed, dude. Like, it's like, we don't really actually care about the information at all, we're just gonna kill you. Like, you gotta go to whatever her name. I guess we don't know what her name is. She's just like their
Oh, the higher do we know what
yeah.
her name is?
I don't think she has like a name. I think they just kind of refer to her as like their god, you know,
Well, but
and
it's like she has a name because it was a lady, like, it was an actual
yeah,
person.
but do we know like her first name? I
Oh, I
think
don't
we
know.
maybe we do. I don't know. We're bad at this, but
We are bad at this.
no, we're not. We're just like we don't need this stuff is the details are not important. It's really just like a detail like that is not important. The
No,
point
I know.
is,
Okay, don't take that yeah, let's move on.
yeah, the the point is, we learn that about them, and then they cut this guy open, and this is where like, and maybe I'm crazy, but like, I really do feel like there's something that happens and like these a lot of times like the Ellie and Dina scenes and oh like just a lot of stuff throughout the show where I'm like it does feel a little bit safe in the way that like I if I were just gonna like picture the world and especially like from what I remember of the video game and stuff and like how that would be recreated in like real life, I would think it's like a lot darker and a lot more fucked up and like a lot grittier and I would like more moments that are like actually horrifying, which it's just not the show.
No,
But
it's not,
like
unfortunately.
yeah, but like I would love that version of it where it's like really, really horrifying. And so this is like a great example of how you could do that. But instead we just sort of like see it from a distance and I'm kind of like, I want to be in there, dude. Like I
You
wish
wanna
there's
get
like
in there?
I'm just saying, like I
You wanna
wish there
get
was like
in
a
yeah.
you know what I mean? Like I wish there was like a close-up shot where like they cut him open and like you see the guts pour out of it. Like I want to feel like dirty because it's like such a like it's such a dirty world. Like you're living in like a post-apocalyptic world. There are like infected like gross things everywhere. Now we're like now there's like a cult involved and like all of this stuff and I'm like I want to like feel like it's like really fucked up and like from a distance I just don't
Yeah.
get the same feeling. Like I'm like I
Well,
you know?
also, it would be helpful, and this is, again, like a writing issue, a writing and, like, performance issue, I guess, where it would be helpful if our characters were maybe a little bit more shell-shocked by, how stark
Yeah.
and different this world they're in Seattle is than their own,
Yeah,
where
it's
they're
like
from.
if I saw a guy if I saw somebody do that to a guy, like,
Yeah. Well,
you know,
because
the
it's like
response has to be much more significant than what it is.
so, like, the wolves aren't like so, like, the presence of the wolves aren't, like, more extreme than the presence of, what is it, like, FEMA? Is that what firm
Fedra?
Fedra, thank you.
Yeah.
Fedra, we're which Ellie's familiar with, right? But,
Yeah.
like, the presence of this cults and, like, the people hanging from the ceiling and their guts
Much
pouring
different.
out,
Yeah.
that is this is a whole new universe that neither of
Yeah.
them,
But
like, have
even, like,
yeah.
even when it was just Fedra or whatever, like, I do really think, like with the exception of Joel's death, which is, like, so significant and, like, so heartbreaking, like, I do really think that in like you're saying, like, there is a way to get more from the characters and establish that like when certain people die it's like fucked up like the world that they're in is just like really fucked up and like it should just like affect people in certain ways along the road. Sometimes it does, to be fair. There was parts in the first season where like when Joel, for example, when the kid died in the first season, like Joel was like, you know, that it was like really emotional and he was really messed up about that. uh and so it does happen. But yeah, I think what you're saying is true, where if I saw somebody, hanging from a tree and then their intestines were, like, pouring out of their body, I'd be like, you know, that's
Well, no,
probably not
they
something you're
walk into
used
this
to.
building, nobody's in this building, right? They walk into this building, they walk into a room, and there's just, like,
Yeah,
5 guys hanging from the
yeah,
ceiling with
yeah,
their
with just, like,
guts
their guts poured out. It's
it's
like,
like,
that's
"What?
crazy.
What?"
Like, I mean, yeah. It's like, it's all a little too normal, and that's what I mean about it feeling safe is, like, I sometimes feel like it's like and maybe this is just the nature of adapting a video game that is, like, so popular that I'm aware of the source material because a lot of times when I watch like movies that are adapted from books, for example, it's like I might be aware of the book, but I haven't read the book. But it's like I'm too aware of the game. And so when you kind of know the beats, essentially, it all just like doesn't feel as fucked up as it can. So that's like my maybe not even a fault on their part, but I do think there is a way where they could emphasize some of this stuff a little bit more and make it feel as fucked up of a situation as it actually is in practice. But Then after that, they split up, and Ellie says one thing and then does another thing, and ends up at the hospital where she finds Nora, who is one of the people that was there when Joel died. She's one of the people that helped find and kill Joel with Abby,
Yes.
and she corners Nora in a room, and then Nora gets out of this room pretty easily. Actually, I mean, Ellie really did not.
Ellie's kind of a bitch. Not
Yeah,
well, I
she,
shouldn't say that. Ellie's
yeah.
kind like I
This is like what you did on. What did you do? Never mind. I'm not gonna. I don't.
but no, I what I mean by that is like Ellie the character is how do I put this and without be saying derogatory words?
Yeah. Well, it's probably a problem that you only know how to describe it using derogatory words.
No, she's like not really about it though. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah.
She's
She's
like
soft.
yeah, she's soft. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. That's I
Yeah.
guess that's what I'm getting at.
But then she's not
But then she's
in a
not.
scene
Yes.
just a couple moments later,
Yeah.
which is the point. And I think that's a good scene. But we're gonna get the point is she corners Nora in this room, and then Nora very quickly devises a plan to get out of this cornering, run away. But then when she's on the run and Ellie is chasing her, she goes down to this forbidden zone of the hospital. And what's important here that we didn't, I just my voice just made such a weird noise. What's important here that we didn't mention in the opening is that when they're having this discussion about closing the place off, they say, "We don't need to tell anybody who doesn't already know." So
Mhm.
they're closing off this whole section of the hospital, and they're like, "Oh, we're just not gonna tell." Like what they don't know doesn't hurt them. Like let's
What
just keep it
doesn't
away from
kill
them.
you makes you stronger.
That's not really the same sentiment, but it is a good song. So I'll allow it. Um, and then Nora goes down to this place, obviously not knowing what's down there. And Ellie follows. Nora pretty immediately uh is in trouble because
Yeah, Nora
she's
identifies,
breathing
"Oh
this
fuck,
in.
there are spores in the air."
Yeah, and Ellie unfazed. But what Ellie does see before we get to the ending is these what I was talking about before, this fate worse than death, where these people are kind of like trapped in the walls a little bit. It's kind of like
I
Alien,
was gonna
you
say it's like
know?
Alien. I
Yeah.
tweeted this. It's like the Alien Hive.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Where they're like stuck and they're still alive in there.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
And that's like what I want. Like that's like scare that's like horrifying. Like that actually emphasizes how horrifying the situation is like that specifically, which is like this I'd rather just be dead. Like that's so much worse than being dead.
Right.
Um so the yeah, we see that ends yeah, there's some gross images. It's hard to look at. And then Ellie finds Nora who like cannot breathe obviously, is like struggling to even stand up. Um and Nora kind of explains what Joel did in the hospital,
And
all
then
of this terrible stuff Joel
yeah,
did, and
yeah.
then Ellie just
Ellie's like,
says,
"I know,
"I
man.
know."
I know."
Yeah, she's just like, "I don't give a fuck."
Does she
Um,
know? Who's to say? But well,
True,
you know what I
yeah.
mean? It's like that
No,
like,
yeah,
does she yeah.
that's true, yeah, it's like she could just be, so, like, determined that, like, whatever Nora was going to say wouldn't matter to her. Um Which, like, I mean, it goes back to the moral thing where it's like you are kinda like they said something about this in the Last of Us podcast episode, which is that, like, the kind of, like, hypocritical thing, which is that what Joel does, obviously, is risk a bunch of other people's lives just to protect Ellie, where it's like they could have saved everybody, but he did this for Ellie. But then, like, by going down there and like opening up the floodgates of the spores in the air,
It's yeah,
you are risking everybody else's life just to save yourself.
yeah,
And so it's like a great parallel where it's like people will say one thing is bad and then do the exact thing. Um so yeah, she explains that whole thing that Joel did. Ellie's like, I don't give a fuck. And then Ellie beats the shit out of her. She starts torturing her. Um, and this is where we see what we referred to before as a bit of an angry moment, and what you just described as, I guess, the opposite of her being soft. She's pretty aggressive in this moment.
Yeah, it is a mask off moment, and then we
Yeah,
immediately also this like incredible like not incredible, a really good like red lighting.
yeah,
That's like kind of
yeah,
like very inspired, like direct from the game, like the same scene in the game. Uh, Really cool. And then it cuts to a flashback to Ellie,
yeah.
a happy
Yeah,
Ellie.
and that's how the episode ends, and I guess the assumption here, I'm assuming you assume the same, is that, next week's episode is going to be the continuation of this flashback, and perhaps an entire flashback episode if
If
we're
it's
lucky.
not, I'm gonna be really fucking annoyed. I'll
Yeah,
tell you what.
yeah. I do hope it's an entire I mean, I think it's safe to assume that next week's episode is going to start with where this flashback left off, but whether it's the whole episode is still up in the
Right.
air. I do hope it's just an entire episode of it, though. I
Yeah.
think that would be one of the, great episodes of the season if that's the case, and we get Joel back, and maybe the IMDb rating will be a little bit
Yeah,
higher.
maybe the IMDb rating bounces back as Pedro Pascal's here.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly, just like a little spike. But yeah, so are after talking about it, would you was that like an exaggeration when you said it was the best episode, or do you think this is the best episode of the series?
Maybe. I think that the highs of the first season are really good. I really love the first episode of the first season. Like the pilot
Yeah,
episode that's 90 minutes long.
yeah,
There's so much intrigue in that fucking world that it builds, and
mhm,
I think Pedro Pascal is so good. That I really like that episode a lot. But I think in this episode, once Jesse comes in, or like right before, like once they're getting attacked by all of the like stalkers in the warehouse, once that starts happening, from there to the end of the episode, which is like the last half hour or whatever, uh, it's so sick. It's just like everything that happens is like, oh shit, you know.
yeah,
Um, so that's
yeah,
my read on the episode. Very sick. Very like, holy crap, holy freaking crap, Lois.
okay. Uh, let's talk about episode 9 of The Studio, as Doug said, the penultimate
The
episode,
penultimate episode.
and a two-parter.
Yeah,
First time
two-parter. To
getting a
be
little
continued.
two-parter where this episode ends with a to be continued before we get to the finale next week. But let's start back before that. This episode is centered around CinemaCon. Uh, what we
Yeah, that's true.
learn, what we learn early in the episode, which I think this is actually where I want to start because I think this is important, is that like the studio is doing well is what we learn at the beginning of the episode, is that they're in like a great position. They're talking everybody everywhere is talking about how this Kool-Aid movie is going to be the next Barbie.
Or at least
um
they think they're doing well.
Yes,
Because
but
yeah, they're
also,
gonna.
like,
Yeah,
outside opinions are saying that they're doing well,
right.
like outlets other than themselves are saying, like, this could be their year, and so it suggests that this isn't just, like, their perspective on it. It's like, no, this Kool-Aid movie could be a huge hit, which I don't know how much sense that makes after the previous episodes that we watched, but somehow
Yeah,
it's still
yeah.
got good legs. But then also like their smaller projects are looking like they could be going in a good direction. They did well at the Globes last time we saw them. They're hopefully going to do that again with their other projects that they're working on now. So like it's kind of like bringing up all of these projects that were mentioned in other points in the season, which I think is cool. But yeah, we know the studio is doing well, which is why this kind of prediction that you and I have had this whole time about like, will he or won't he get fired? I feel like it's kind of making it seem way less likely that he gets fired. Whether or not this like CinemaCon, because I'm assuming that this finale is about their presentation at CinemaCon, whether or not that goes well, I feel like his job is not nearly on the line as much as the episodes we watched earlier in the season made it seem like they were. Because all of the things that went wrong just ended up not mattering because now the studio is like doing great.
I
So
texted you this yesterday, and I said, when we were predicting like what how the season's gonna end and whether or not he gets fired, we failed to consider that Matt, the Seth Rogen character, isn't the only dumb character in the show, and that everybody
yeah,
else is also really dumb.
yeah, exactly.
Um,
Including a returning character
True.
who we've been waiting for. Bryan Cranston comes back in this episode, and Griffin Mill, the character, uh, he's fucking dumb. He's 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 also really dumb, and he does some dumb shit this episode. Uh, but it was exciting to see him come back. I think it's exciting that this episode brings back a lot of familiar faces, especially the fact that there are now they're like weaving back in returning guest stars where it's like the directors and actors that we were seeing in previous episodes are now becoming like Zoe Kravitz is now just like a regular on the
A
show. Not like a
regular she's in
regular.
2 episodes.
Sure, but like she like that's not what I mean. I just mean
Yeah.
like when they make a second season, it's very possible that they're just like that she
She's
just
a
pops
she's
in
like a
for an
real
episode.
character in the universe. She's not
Yeah,
just like a one.
exactly.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
You know, in the past couple episodes, she's been a big presence,
Yeah.
and even in some of the episodes that she's not in, I feel like they mention her, you know. So she's a big part of this episode as well. I really liked Dave Franco in this
Well, that's what I was
episode.
gonna say. Dave Franco is the best. Brought incredible energy.
Yeah, I'm kind of shocked. I mean, obviously, like the whole James Franco situation, not in a good spot right now. Like we're never gonna see James Franco again, really, in like positive light. But I'm
Yeah.
kind of shocked that like more of the frequent Seth Rogen collaborators have not been brought into the show for comedic purposes. Because when he just like brings Dave Franco into this episode and lets him play a version of Dave Franco that matches like the Seth Rogen style of comedy that we have known for most of our lives, through, like, their studio comedy collaborations. I'm like, "Yeah, dude, bringing guys like that into the show to do stupid shit like that is ideal." I would love it if they do more of that.
And this whole episode, the plot is about Seth Rogen wanted to do shrooms.
Yes.
So he gets to connect through Dave Franco to get shrooms, and
Yeah.
when the drug dealer comes to give him the chocolates with the shrooms in them, she tells him that there's 2/8 in each one.
Yeah,
I
and she's
knew
like, "Do
what
you."
that meant.
Yeah, and she's like, "Do you know what that means?" And he's like, "Yeah, it's a quarter." He's like, yeah.
Well,
He's
that's the
just
thing
like
where it's
does
like, so
math.
he goes like,
He's like, "Yeah, 2/8, a quarter?"
0.25, and she rightfully confused goes, yeah, I guess, you know? Because it's like 2/8 of an ounce,
Yeah,
right? And immediately I knew, like, I don't know, that seemed very obvious to me because, you know,
yeah.
2/8 of a gram doesn't make any fucking sense.
Yeah, but then it's also, like, funny that later in the episode, I don't know, maybe I'm misremembering this, but I feel like later in the episode, he says the same thing when people ask him, and then there are,
Yeah.
like, other characters who also don't know,
Yeah.
but they have, like, positively done shrooms before
Yeah, I don't know
because
why none of them
you know what I
they're all
mean? Because, like,
stupid.
because
Yeah.
yeah, it's like because he, like, says it, and then they're like, "I don't know what the fuck that means," but then they're also like, "I haven't done shrooms in a while," and so it's like, you know that this isn't their first time doing it, but they also are clueless.
Yeah.
Um, so
Um
but whatever. Uh, yeah, I what do you think about, like? Because this is really my disconnect with the episode, and I'm not saying I didn't like the episode, I did, just to get that out of the way. I think the studio is on a good path now where it doesn't seem like there's gonna be any bumps in the road, at least in the last 4 episodes and now going into the finale. Um, I tend to not be super into comedy that is centered around characters just, like, doing drugs, specifically because I am not somebody who did drugs at any point in my life, really. When I was like growing up, I drank in high school or whatever. I didn't even go as far as to smoke weed with people. I When other people would smoke weed, people would smoke weed around me. I would not even participate in that. So, as somebody who doesn't have like even stuff like that, where it's like there were certain, like growing up, you probably hate this movie, I imagine, as most people probably should. But like Mac and Devin Go to High School, right? The Snoop Dogg movie, like that and Wiz Khalifa. I was like, that was like funny to me at that age, even though I didn't smoke weed, but there was, like, a lot of other examples of whether it was, like, weed-based humor or just, like, drug-based humor, like stoner comedies where I was just like, "Yeah, this doesn't really I don't really find this that funny." I part of it is probably because it's just, like, it wasn't my personality, but also, yeah, I don't know. I tend to I guess there's, like, exceptions to the rule, obviously, but I don't know how you feel about, like, movies like that in general
I think that
or TV shows, I guess.
it could be funny. I like Seth Rogen,
Sure.
um, and that's kind of
And
like
it
a
is,
big
like,
part of Seth
pretty common
Rogen's
in Seth
thing.
Rogen movies,
Yeah.
yeah. I and those are mostly the exceptions, obviously, like, even, like, Pineapple Express is a big one, right? Where it's, like, that's all about drugs, and it's, like, I always thought that was funny. Like
And the comedy in this one, when with the drugs, kind of comes more from the like Zoe Kravitz, and it's
yeah,
not even just like her being fucked up, but it's like everybody really paranoid and be like,
yeah,
"Oh, is somebody going to die?
yeah.
Is something really,
I
really,
do think
really
there's a
bad
really
going to
funny
happen?"
moment where when he, like he, like, locks Zoe Kravitz in the room, leaves for, like, a minute, and then comes back in the room, and she's, like, talking about how, like, she's been spending hours doing something, and then he's like, "It's been 30 seconds," and then he, like, tries to leave, and she's like, "No, don't leave me in here," and she's just like she has to just, like that sounds like torture, like, it's like she's just gonna live through, like, a year in her brain while she's in that room.
Yeah.
Um, that's funny, but yeah, so, like, stuff like that, I get it. I just think in general, it's not always, like, my brand of humor. But yeah, I think you make a good point, which is that when Seth Rogen does it, it does tend to appeal to me a little bit more than when somebody else does it, I guess. Um,
But the big kind of overarching like where the conflict is really coming in here is this from Bryan Cranston tells Seth Rogen
oh,
that
right.
the board might sell the studio,
To
right?
Amazon.
To Amazon,
And then
which
they're
is
like,
so
fuck
funny.
those guys.
Yeah, fuck those guys.
Yeah.
Um,
No, I mean, that's a real like
yeah.
conflict. That's maybe the first or one of the only real like conflicts that can't just be solved on an episode by episode basis where like it seems like what I was saying where it's like things that presented themselves as issues in previous episodes just kind of are like neatly wrapped up off screen and none of it ended up totally mattering. This is like one of those things where it matters obviously. uh there's just no uh fixing it. So or not that there's no fixing it, but like it's not like they could just, like, bring up the idea of selling to Amazon and then just, like, jump to a different plot in the next episode. Like, it has to be solved in an episode for us.
Yeah, I'm gonna go out on a limb and say Continental Studios is not going to be sold to Amazon in the next
Yeah.
episode.
Yeah, I
Um,
I probably agree. I
but
wonder if, like, there's a situation in which the presentation just, like, goes well. Yeah. Because it's like because it is the end of the season, and, like, we have had nothing but bad things happen to the characters every single week, and I wonder if there's just, like I mean, obviously, the setup in this episode is that the presentation is gonna go bad
well,
because
the way
they
that this
are
episode ends is so
yeah,
crazy, where
like,
it's
Bryan Cranston is
yeah, Bryan Cranston is super, super, super fucked up,
yeah,
super crazy gone, not
and
on
they
this
cannot
world,
catch him.
right? Well, but Patty,
Yeah,
catches him, and Patty is like, "You know what? Fuck this guy. Like, I don't care. Like,
right.
get this guy out of here." So she calls real life real life entertainment reporter Matt Bellany.
Yeah,
um, and he's like, "Hey,"
which is a funny detail as
anonymously, and
well.
is like, "Hey, I have a story for you. Come to this location where he is
Right,
fucked up
where
and act like causing a
yeah,
scene." Yeah,
and so that yeah, I guess that sets up
because she's the only person that doesn't know that they need this to go well, or it
right,
can get
'cause
sold
she
to
wasn't in the
Amazon.
room when Matt
Yes,
told them.
yes, yes.
Yeah, that's a good point. Um, yeah, because then she loses her job too.
Yeah.
So, uh, so that's another problem, but I do yeah, I don't know, I wonder if there's a world in which, like I guess that's kind of impossible to solve. What if, like Is there a world in which that story goes public and Bryan Cranston has to step down and
Yeah, I
like
think that would be.
Matt takes his job and
I was
then someone
considering
else
this.
takes Matt's
This
job?
is a cartoon, so it's possible. Anything is
Yeah.
possible in this cartoon, right?
Yeah,
Um,
exactly, because I'm like, in real life,
but
no,
I
but
don't think that will happen though, just because that's not gonna be it's him being the CEO of Continental Studios will not be as interesting as being.
no.
Yeah,
But then he does get oversight over the decisions that he can't make currently, which is, like, the direction of the studio.
yeah,
Like, then he does get to, like, have more of, like, a say as to the types of projects that they focus on. But then that almost feels too easy because then it's like everything's convenient. Like, where's the conflict come from if that's the case?
yeah, no, he's not
Uh,
gonna be the CEO.
no, I don't
No.
think so either, but something to consider, I guess. I want
What
yeah,
could
I
happen?
wonder what's gonna happen.
Patty could be the CEO. That could happen. Catherine O wait,
That
right?
yeah,
Yeah,
Catherine
yeah,
O'Hara, yeah.
yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
That could happen. That would be I mean, that would be, like, bad, I think.
Yeah.
I think. Yeah, I don't know. I thought this was fun. I thought this
No,
was a
I
good
thought it was
episode.
fun. I think yeah, I think it was fun.
Dave Franco was just like, it's just like, I mean, really did it for me. I not, and it's not to say that I didn't laugh super hard during the last 3 episodes, but I really love the fucking like that brand of humor, like the dumb Seth Rogen humor that I have become accustomed to for like 2 decades now. I think I don't know who else he would bring in from like the world of Seth Rogen comedies. I mean James Franco, obviously the biggest player, and so Dave Franco is kind of a substitute for him there. But like,
They should bring
surely
in, Vincent Gallo.
I don't know about that. I was gonna say Michael Cera
Yeah, no, Michael Cera, yeah.
would
Or
be
who's the skinny
would probably
guy?
be ideal.
Who's
Jay
the guy?
Baruchel.
Yes, actually, that is who I was thinking of. Yeah, they should
Yeah,
bring him in.
Jay Baruchel would be funny.
When's the
Yeah,
last thing he's been in?
I mean nothing. Jay Baruchel's no, I'm being mean.
No, I mean, like, seriously, when was the last thing he was in, bro? Like, I
Let's find out live on air.
How to Train Your Dragon 3?
That's true. Yeah, he is the How to Train Your
Oh,
Dragon
he's in
guy.
Blackberry. Duh.
Sure, that's not exactly like uh huge. Well, I guess like the era of him being the face of any studio comedies is behind us,
Yeah, I
obviously.
mean, those movies don't exist
But
anymore.
yeah, those
No,
movies
but
don't happen
it was
anymore.
literally
But
Blackberry. That was the last thing. Like,
yeah, yeah, he's
oh,
not
he's a recurring character in the show Fubar. Are you familiar with this?
literally never heard of this in my life.
Fubar is an American action comedy television series created by Nick Santora for Netflix. It stars Arnold Schwarzenegger in his leading role in the scripted live action television series. Um,
What?
yeah, it's can we get a plot
There's
synopsis?
no way this is real. What the fuck?
Yeah, it's
Is that Monica Barbar? What's she doing here?
You don't know about Fubar? Everybody's talking about it.
Bro, Gabriel Luna's in this show. Bro, what's happening?
That is Monica Barbaro, isn't it? What the fuck?
Bro,
Bro,
fucking
wait.
Roderick from Diary of a Wimpy Kid is in this
This
show.
would be like Zoe Rose Bryant's favorite TV show. Why aren't people talking about this?
Oh, brother. Also, you know what I'll say to end this? Great Chase Sui Wonders episode. Another banger from her. She's great.
The way she was doing her character was gross this episode. She kept licking
She's
stuff. She kept putting stuff
She's
in her
funny.
mouth.
I thought it was very
Gross.
funny when I thought it was incredibly funny when yeah, like you said, she like Seth Rogen is like sweaty and gross and
Yeah,
people are
I
like,
was
"What is that?" And she like wipes it with her finger and like for no reson just immediately puts it in her mouth. I'm like, "What is
that
happening?"
was so fucking gross. And then there's like this there's like cheese on the wall that she just swipes with her fingers and puts in her mouth. And then I was like, "Bleh, what the fuck? It was
Yeah.
disgusting.
No, she's great. Anyway, next week we made it to the studio finale.
Yeah.
Which is exciting stuff. So we'll talk about the finale next week. We'll talk about another Last of Us episode next week. And that's all. We'll see you later.
Bye.
Bye. Listeners of the pod, you guys saw Doug quote tweet Zoe yesterday posting about the Kingdom of Heaven being like blah blah blah, like she wouldn't stop talking to me the whole movie. What's that all about? What's It's just like we don't need to know all these details about your life, dude.